What I'm doing right now is I'm redrawing my sketch on that final piece of paper. I'm doing it all lightly in pencil, and I don't have to get too detailed. And in this case, I'm actually working from a photo that was on my cell phone. But what you end up doing here is going to help you in the long run figure out how to collage all your materials. So definitely take your time and make sure what you are putting down on this piece of paper today is what you want the final piece to look like. Here's my collage. It's the same piece that I've been showing you guys in class, and this is the same chunk that I showed you last time I saw you that I had already started. And it's important to use those sticky notes that I had you label on your final heavy piece of paper, because that's going to help you figure out today where all of your items are going to go when you get your bag. So everybody has a bag, and it's okay if there's writing on it. Most of them are recycled. And we all have the same things. Some of them are different colors. But for the most part, we all have the exact same contents. Now remember, your job is to use all of the materials in your bag, but you don't have to use the entire material. So that means you don't have to use all of the crayon, although you do have to use some of it. You don't have to use all of your 2 pieces of yarn, but you have to use some of the yarn, and you have to use some of the clothespin and the other stuff as well. If you're planning on using the paint right away, make sure you get yourself a water container and a paper towel. You should already have a small paintbrush in there. Don't do anything to the paintbrush. Leave it intact. Don't break it. Don't cut the bristles off to use in your project. Your paintbrush should stay whole for this project. Alright, so the tough part about working on our collage is going to be to get things accurate as we're cutting them out. Obviously, if you look at my sketch here, I want some newspaper to fill in my straw. But not being able to trace my straw, it's kind of guesswork at first to get the right size and shape happening there. So what I do is I cut a little bit, I put it back down on my project to see if I'm getting the rough general shape happening there. And as I cut my straw shape out, I'm actually going to cut it a little bit larger than I know I need it to be. Obviously that's way too big for my paper, but it's going to give me a good idea of the curve in the straw. So now I can use that, and I can actually go through and mark this piece off, and it gives me a much better idea of the actual size, shape, and curve that I need when I cut my paper out. Okay, I've got my straw piece cut out. I've even got the angle so that when I glue it down, it's going to work with this piece that I had in my sketch. When you go to glue, it's important to remember that these recycled pieces of paper are still fairly thin, so don't overdo it with your glue. It might be a good idea to use either small dots or small lines to glue this stuff down. So looking back at my sketch, I've got my cup filled in with my newspaper, I've got my straw filled in with my newspaper, and now I'm going to work on some of my yarn that I wanted on the straw to make it look like those lines right there. I put down glue first, and I've got these little tiny pieces already cut. That's going to be a lot easier and more successful than trying to put glue directly onto the yarn and then gluing it down. Now once my glue is dry, I can trim off these extra edges up here that are making it kind of look nasty and unneat. Cardboard is probably going to be the toughest material that you have to work with in your bag. A couple different things that you can consider with cardboard. All of this crazy looking squiggly stuff in here is called Kurget. And if you want to use that Kurget to add a texture, you can take a pencil and push it in there just enough to get it started and then peel it off. And that's going to expose all that stuff underneath. And if you don't like these pieces stuck inside there, use your pencil and gently push them down. And the cool thing about these pieces of paper is they'll actually start to lay flat if you take a brush, dip it in water, and just lightly brush water on top of them. You don't need to soak it, and anybody who's ever seen wet cardboard knows that wet cardboard starts to smell kind of funny and fall apart. But just enough water on your brush to get those pieces to lay flat. Now I'm going to end up using this for part of my coffee filter. Looking back at my sketch, my coffee filter had a label next to it that said cardboard, and I want to use that cardboard going up and down to help kind of create those little ridges that we would normally see on the coffee filter. Okay, the cardboard is tricky, but if you look, I lined up the edge with the spot I need on my sketch where the coffee filter is going to be on the left side, and over here I did the same thing on the right side, but I just made a mark with a marker to figure out how wide I need this piece to be. We're going to have to do the same thing on the bottom. So this is the end of the coffee filter here, and I know it's probably kind of difficult to see on the video clip, but I'm actually just going to start to sketch out the rough shape I need this chunk of cardboard to be. Think back to last year, we did a cardboard project where we had to use an X-Acto knife, and we're going to do the same thing this year. Cardboard and X-Acto knives go together because that X-Acto makes it much easier to cut through your cardboard. Just like last year, don't cut towards your body though, cut away from your body, or at least get your fingers out of the way. Don't hack through it the first time, use that method we talked about last year called scoring, and when you cut perpendicular to the currugate like this, that's when it's most difficult. But if you keep scoring and just cutting into it a little bit at a time, your cardboard is going to come out cleaner and easier than if you just try to hack through it all at once. Okay, I've got my cardboard all cut up, and I've also cut it to the size I need it to be because I want it to look like it's being overlapped by this piece of metal in the front. So I've got two pieces on top, and then I also cut two pieces to fit on the bottom as well. I'm not going to glue these down yet though, because I want to go in and add some crayon here, but I also want to add some more details around the other metal parts before I start sticking this on. So it'll be easier if you pre-plan a little bit and think about what needs to go down that's completely flat and two-dimensional first, things like colored pencil or crayon or marker, and then glue things on top of those as you go. Okay, so I've started going in with my crayon on top here, but if you look, I've also gone in with the colored pencil. You don't have to just stick with the materials in your bag. You can add other stuff, but you do have to be sure that you're using the things that are in your bag. So I went over my paper with a purple colored pencil, and then I'm going to go over the top of that with my crayon. Now in just a second I'm going to show you a little crayon hack that you can use to get rid of that paper texture as you're using your crayon. Only way it's going to work though is if you are cognizant of how hard you're pushing down on your crayon, and you're going to want to push down a little bit harder than normal. Not so hard obviously that you're breaking your crayon in half. So when I add that extra layer of wax on there, if I want to get rid of some of this paper texture that's showing through, I can go back over it with my colored pencil, and what that colored pencil is doing is it's using the little bit of wax that's actually in that colored pencil tip, and it's starting to push around the extra wax that was already down on the paper from the crayon, and it's going to fill in those spaces just enough that it's a little less obvious that we've got that watercolor paper texture happening there, and it's something that I also did up here as well. So at this point, if you look, compared to my sketch, I'm kind of starting to lose some of the details through here. So this might be a good opportunity if you know things like these little tiny rivets are done on your project, or the similar details that you'd have in yours. If you know those are done and finished, it might be a good time now to go in with a black permanent marker and retrace around those, just so you don't get too much happening on your project and you forget what's going where. I haven't completely decided yet what I want to do with the texture that I'm going to use for my coffee grounds, but one thing I did decide that no matter what I put on top of it, I wanted to add a little bit of watercolor paint to it, just to help create a little bit more variety and a little bit more depth to my project. Now I'm not going to go too heavy on my paint, but just enough that when it dries it's going to add a little extra value and variety in, depending on what I put on top. Alright, I decided for my coffee grounds that I would use the texture of some of my top layer of recycled cardboard, and I colored over it with my permanent marker black. I put some glue down on top of the red paint, and then when that glue was still wet, I just started pulling pieces of this and gently pushing it into the glue with. Okay, right now I'm using a little bit more newspaper to create the handle for my coffee cup. If you look up here, I also used some extra newspaper clippings to create kind of a rim around my mug. And when I cut it up, I cut it into several different pieces. That way I can use that line that was originally running straight across the picture, but now I can cut it up and begin to make it curve like that. So as you're experimenting with making images fit, it's okay also if you have an image, kind of like my coffee mug handle, that has negative space in it, which would be the space where your finger actually goes through the mug. If you need to draw that out, and then come back in with your X-Acto knife and cut it out so you can get a nice, precise cut. Here's my final piece. Everything is done. I've used all the materials in the bag, and although I didn't use all of that material that was provided to me, I did use each piece on my project. If you look where the coffee filter used to be brown, I used some of the acrylic paint that's over there by sink number 2. Used up most of your space to create a composition that actually looks like an invention that we would have seen coming out of Leonardo da Vinci's sketchbook. Number 3, do you have some type of texture happening on there from the use of the materials that you had provided for you? And number 4, do you have something that was eventually re-outlined with a black Sharpie marker so that everything stands out and we have a nice contrast between your lines and your color and any white areas that you left as well? So, your final piece for your reflection is to think about this question. How does art influence the ideas, emotions, and actions of people who experience it?